Verizon wants to offer you some tech news, so they are investing a considerable amount of money into a new online publication that they refer to as SugarString.com. Now, if you want to know exactly what they want to offer you, their website says the following: a site that delivers the latest in technology and lifestyle news for a generation that doesn't separate tech from everyday living. From breaking news to thoughtful essays, best-in-class op-eds, and beyond, this site covers what millennials really care about today.
Really?
That's really fascinating because it turns out that there are two major things that this tech publication refuses to cover under any circumstance: net neutrality and U.S. surveillance on American citizens.
Wow. So this is even more amazing because normally it's informal. Like they'll let it be known. Somebody writes an article about one of those things and they get moved into a closet and everybody knows, oh, be cool, be cool. We work at Verizon. Don't write articles like that. In this case, when people were applying for jobs, they literally told them, you are not allowed to write those two articles, so don't come here if you think you're going to write about net neutrality or spying that we were a part of.
Yep.
Amazing.
This is according to the Daily Dot, and they're very specific over at Verizon. In exchange for the major corporate backing, tech reporters at SugarString are expressly forbidden from writing about American spying or net neutrality around the world, two of the biggest issues in tech and politics today. Now, what's fascinating is that this publication does write about government surveillance in other countries and is very, very critical of that. But since it's taking place in the United States, they've decided, nah, we're going to kind of avoid it, probably because Verizon was very much willing to hand over data regarding U.S. Citizens to the government.
Of course. So this is a story that is emblematic of what's happening in the country on two very important issues. One is we have the state and business completely merging, right? So, of course, China is a competitor. It's a competitor for nationally, kind of, for pride. They don't really care about that. It's also literally a competitor in a lot of these markets, right? So with China surveillance, can you believe they're doing that? Russia, etc., whatever it might be, right? But the business state merger has decided we can report about that, but you can't report about our state problems.
It's ridiculous.
Because Verizon has the government's back, and that's even more important part than the competition is in this context. Verizon has the government's back and the government has Verizon's back. Because it's not like they're even two different entities at this point. The top corporations fund the politicians. The politicians then turn around and use those corporations in ways that benefit them in terms of national security, get to spy in on your enemies and chase your enemies to all across the world. And by enemies, I don't mean terrorists. I mean enemies of the state like Edward Snowden and Manning and all those guys, right? And everybody wins. And then your mergers, which turn you into even bigger monopolies, are allowed by the government. And everybody wins except us.
Everyone wins except us. And also it really brings to question what the whole point of journalism is to begin with, right?
Exactly.
Journalism is supposed to be utilized to hold government officials or those in power accountable for their actions. But now it's being utilized as a propaganda tool for the wealthiest people and those in power. So it's great that they're being this transparent about it. But one thing that I found fascinating is that even though I look through as many websites as possible, I read as much news as possible, I didn't see this article. This is a fascinating article. It was covered in the Daily Dot, but it's not getting front page coverage in other publications.
Now, the Daily Dot wrote about it because one of their reporters was approached by Verizon with these conditions, right? And he turned them down and he wrote about it. But normally that would then be like, wow, isn't that a fascinating story? The rest of the media is like...
And I think the reason why is because you can't throw stones when you live in a glass house, right? I think that the majority of the media is owned by corporations. They have corporate sponsors, and a lot of them allow those sponsors to have editorial control. So I don't think you really want to poke at Verizon knowing that you're doing something similar.
Right. Now, the corporate parent issue is an important one. But Verizon is literally their sponsors for so many of these sites. And if they're not... And much more importantly on television, et cetera. And if they're not a sponsor, they'd like them to be a sponsor because Verizon spends an enormous amount of money in media. And so the rest of the media is like, no, Verizon, we didn't say anything. What do you? Okay, so that's part of the issue here. But I think Anna's entirely right that the second biggest point here is that the corporate media or corporations overall, have dropped pretenses. In the old way of doing things, they would do it in exactly the way that I just explained. I'm going to give you ads, and in return, you be cool, right? And you don't criticize me. In fact, my favorite example is Archer Daniels Midland, who is a a company that doesn't sell anything to the public, and they would spend millions of dollars every year funding the Sunday talk shows. And you see a little supported by Archer Daniels Midland at the end, and you're like, what can I buy from them? Nothing, right? The reason was they were paying each of those shows $1 million a year to not talk about them, right? Because they were getting good, sweet deals from the government, and they didn't want that exposed.
Right.
Okay. So now in this case, what Verizon's done is said, you know what? I'm going to cut out the middleman. So I know we used to fund them and la 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 la. It's getting to be a hassle. Why don't I just set up the website?
Yeah.
Why don't I just become the media? Who could tell the difference anyway? I mean, GE kind of already did this when they used to own NBC. They're a defense contractor, one of the largest defense contractors among the different things that they do. So they bought a media company, and that media company told us how great war was. So like, why don't we do the same thing? So that's what they're doing here. But there's no part of the company, no. It's brazen. We own the whole company. We're pretending to be media, but in reality, it's completely propaganda. We're not going to tell you about it, and we're just going to give you our version of the news.